All right, so I guess we'll get started. 6:30. Welcome everyone to tonight's webinar. My name is Arlene Walker, and I'll be your moderator for this evening's session. We'll be emailing you Dr. Meschino's presentation slides after the webinar, so you won't have to take notes unless you want to during the presentation. Also, we've set aside a half hour after the presentation for questions and answers. So jot down any questions you may have, and I'll give you instructions after the presentation on how to ask your questions when we're ready for that portion. Before we begin, I'd like to tell you about Dr. Meschino. He is the author and co-author of 4 nutrition, wellness, anti-aging books, including the Meschino Optimal Living Program, 7 Steps to Healthy, Fit, Age-Resistant Body, published by Wiley. He is an associate professor in the Division of Physiology and Biochemistry at the Canadian Memorial Chiropractic College, where he has taught courses on nutrition and biochemistry since completing a master's degree in nutrition and biology in 1984. He has also taught nutritional medicine courses for the American Academy of Anti-Aging Medicine, the American Council on Exercise, and the Global Integrative Medicine Institute. Having published over 150 reviewed papers on nutritional and lifestyle medicine in the prevention and complementary management of common degenerative health conditions, Dr. Meschino has established himself as an expert on the evidence-based application of nutrition and lifestyle practices in disease prevention, management, and anti-aging. He has also taught numerous corporate wellness programs to Canadian and American companies and firms, appeared on many TV, radio shows, including his Detroit PBS special, Healthy Aging Naturally, and most recently has developed a leading-edge digital wellness coaching platform for employee group health benefit plans and related wellness programs. He is also the formulator of Adëeva nutritional supplement products sold in Canada and the United States. So on behalf of Adëeva Nutritionals, I want to thank everyone for attending this evening as Dr. Meschino presents this very timely and research-based webinar on how to optimize your immune system and protect your health. And I'll now hand this over to Dr. Meschino.
Thank you, Arlene, and thanks everyone for sitting in tonight. I appreciate it very much. We have a lot to cover, so I don't want to, waste too much time. I think we should get right down to it. So what we're going to look at today is the role of nutrition and lifestyle as it affects the body's immune system, and this is a very important time in our history to have that understanding, of course, with the pandemic really dominating our lives to a large degree. So there's not a lot of humor in the pandemic, but I just thinking back to when I was a teenager, thinking, I used to love to sleep until like 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And, by today's standards, I would be a hero. I guess I was ahead of my time, probably as a lot of you were as well at one time. So let's get down to what we came to talk about today. So it's just a coincidence, really, but in January of 2019, in the journal called The Frontiers of Immunology, this is prior to the pandemic really, taking hold and certainly not being in North America yet or sweeping across Europe. But there was this fantastic review article showing that in order to optimize the health of the body's immune system and make it work in an optimal way to ward off infections and even cancer to a large degree, that the recommended dietary allowance, or the RDA set by the government for certain nutrients, is actually too low. It's fine to prevent a deficiency disease of vitamin C or vitamin E, but in terms of optimizing immunity and how your immune system is going to work over your lifetime, that those levels are actually too low to help maintain optimal defense against infection and also maintain tolerance. That means not have the immune system go haywire where it starts attacking the body. So this is especially true for vitamin C and vitamin E, selenium and vitamin D, and we'll cover those in the talk today. So as I was watching the research unfold during the pandemic, one study after the next showing the importance of various nutrients in optimizing immune system function, but also helping to mitigate against having more severe COVID-19 disease. I'm thinking, where's the government's response? But finally, in February of 2021, the National Institutes of Health published a great review paper on supplements and nutraceuticals in COVID-19 prevention and treatment. And they say, obviously, that optimal nutritional status can prime an individual's immune system to protect against the effects of acute respiratory viral infections by supporting the normal maintenance of the immune system. They go on to say that nutritional strategies have also shown promise in treating COVID-19 hospitalized patients because they're often presenting themselves, as you'll see, as most people are in North America, with at least marginal nutritional deficiencies to start with. And they're saying that supplementation with vitamin C and vitamin D and zinc and some other things that could actually be of great benefit in optimizing immune system function and convey beneficial effects against viral infections because they have very important impact on modulating how the body's immune system works. So they say, a lot of the main risk factors for COVID-19 are linked to poor nutritional status, obesity, hypertension, cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes. A lot of this you've heard before, but in many of these cases, there's a nutritional imbalance or marginal deficiencies that are present. And of course, there's widespread, as we're going to show tonight, vitamin D deficiency, that's worldwide. And there's a strong association between vitamin D deficiency and more serious types of COVID-19 cases that we see. So they're saying, as a result, some international authorities have advised the general public, particularly those at high risk for infection, to consider vitamin D supplementation. And that really should be the case, in my view, that people who are known to be at high risk for vitamin D suboptimal nutritional status should definitely be improving their nutritional status. In the meantime, they want to wait for these long-term clinical trials. But in a published paper in Lancet just a couple of weeks ago, they said, we don't have time during the pandemic for major long-term studies before you do things that are just going to be obviously important for people to consider and move on. So the functions of the immune system are to protect the body's normal, our healthy, our host cells, the cells that make up who we are, to protect us against infection. That's what the immune system does. It also clears damaged tissue. If you've had injuries or previous infections, the immune system clears up the damage afterwards. And the immune system cells are also constantly surveilling for cancer cells that are emerging. Every day your body forms 1 to 3 cancer cells. If they don't commit suicide on their own, which they can do, but if they miss that step because there's some genetic defect, then it's up to the immune cells to find those cancer cells and knock them out before they get any real traction. So the immune system also helps to reduce cancer risk. But so infection and cancer, they overlap in a certain respect. We'll touch on that again, but I'm going to try to keep this focused on the immune system and infection tonight. The immune system also has to adapt normal tolerance. If the immune system goes crazy or haywire, it can start attacking the body's own healthy cells, leading to an autoimmune condition. So you need to have the immune system working in a proper balance, or what we call homeostasis. So your immune system right now is really a product of a number of factors. Genetics, so you inherited. Some people just have incredible genes. They just never get sick no matter what they do. But that's not most people. But genetics play a role, so does the environment, lifestyle factors, and so do nutrition. So at any given time, a lot of these factors are coming together to create sort of what your immune competence is. So I don't want to get too technical tonight, but to understand the immune system and what these cells actually do is really the critical part of understanding the rest of the slides. So I'm going to try to make this as interesting and as fun as possible. So in the bone marrow of certain cells, you have a stem cell, and that stem cell gives rise to all the cells that are in your bloodstream. They come from one common stem cell. But as that stem cell divides, it can sort of mature or morph into these sort of myeloid cells or these lymphoid cells. And the ones that go down this route can further divide and differentiate or further morph into different types of cells, like the erythrocytes, which are your red blood cells. So everybody knows what red blood cells are. They carry oxygen to your tissues. And also the platelets, which are called megakaryocytes and thrombocytes. These are the platelets. If you cut yourself a little bit and you start to bleed, platelets come to the area and they seal it off, and you don't bleed to death if your platelets are working properly. But it also gives rise to mast cells that release histamine if there's an allergic reaction. And then they can further divide into these sort of myeloblasts. And here's where it gets interesting. The myeloblasts then give rise to a series of white blood cells, like the basophils and the neutrophils, the eosinophils, and the monocytes. And for our purposes tonight, the basophils and the eosinophils are not that important. They're more involved in allergy and parasitic infections. But what's really important to this discussion are these little guys here called the neutrophils and the monocytes. So the monocytes can further divide and become what are called macrophages. That which means large eater. Macro is large and phage means to eat. So macrophages will actually come up and find a virus or a bacteria or an emerging cancer cell, and it'll actually eat it and then destroy it and do some other things that you'll see are pretty nifty. On the other side of the equation, you have these other white blood cells down the myeloid or the lymphoid progenitor chain, which give rise to what are called natural killer cells. And that's what they are. They just naturally kill things that don't belong in the body. They don't even need to be prompted to do it. They just know that I should be knocking this thing out. It's a virus that doesn't belong. But more intriguingly here is you get these lymphocytes, and you've heard about lymphocytes before, but there's really two kinds of lymphocytes. There's the B lymphocytes, which produce all the antibodies that are going to help to fight infection. And the B lymphocytes, when there's an infection, morph into plasma cells, which can actually produce way more antibodies than the B cells can on their own. And then there's the T lymphocytes. So I just want to pause here. The T lymphocytes they're called T lymphocytes because the T lymphocytes have to go out of the bone marrow into the bloodstream, but they have to go to the thymus gland behind the breastbone. So the thymus gland puts the T lymphocytes through boot camp by secreting certain kinds of hormones like thymulin hormone. And as you get older, by the time you're 50 years old, your thymus gland has undergone involution. And when the T lymphocytes go to the thymus gland, there almost is no thymus gland remaining. So the T lymphocytes never really go through boot camp after age 50 and really know how to use their ammunition effectively. This is one of the reasons why if somebody is 18 years old and they get pneumonia, they're probably going to do just fine in about 2 weeks. Somebody 95 years old gets pneumonia, you think they could die, even though they both have the same number of immune cells. But the T lymphocytes are much less intelligent than an older person. Now, what I want to discuss tonight is how, even as you get older, can you help to keep those T lymphocytes more intelligent? And you'll see that nutrition and lifestyle can play a big factor. So the T lymphocytes, they're called T lymphocytes because they have to go to the thymus gland, which starts with a T, in order to be initiated, put through boot camp so they can use all their ammunition to knock different infections and cancer cells out of the body. Now, this is the same graph that I just showed you, but I just want to show you as we go along from the monocytes that become these macrophages, the large eaters. Some of the macrophages also become dendritic cells, and they function a lot like macrophages. We're going to see dendritic cells in a minute. And so the monocytes actually morph all, and they create these immune cells that hide in all the tissues of the body. So the osteoclasts go into bone, and the Kupffer cells are found in the liver. The microglia, they're in the brain, but they're all basically doing a lot of the same kind of work. So when a doctor orders a blood panel on you and they say, you know, your white blood cell count is normal, what they mean is your white blood cell count is between 5 and 10,000. But of all those white blood cells, some of them are neutrophils, some of them are lymphocytes, some of them are eosinophils and basophils and monocytes. And notice that neutrophils are the most common immune cell that you have in your bloodstream. They are the front line defense. Then you have lymphocytes, and then eosinophils and basophils, or monocytes rather, and the monocytes tend to go into tissues, and they're in the lungs, they're in the gut, they're in the lining of your synovial joints, like your knees and your hips and your back. They go hiding into the tissue, so you don't see them in the bloodstream that much, but they're very good at fighting infection right in the tissue sites alone. Now, if you get an infection, then very often these numbers start to rise exponentially because these white cells are dividing at a faster rate to try to fight an infection. So how do these immune cells work? What do they do exactly? Well, we have two parts to our immune system. There's sort of the innate immune system that really evolved over millions of years, where you have some of these macrophages that I showed you. The macrophages were originally monocytes, remember? And then the natural killer cells that we talked about, and the neutrophils, which are the #1 immune cells in your bloodstream. And they do this amazing thing. They spot a virus that doesn't belong in the body, or a bacteria, or a fungus, or they see a cancer cell that's emerging. and they just open up their mouth and they eat it. And when they bring it inside themselves, they then can secrete chemicals and destroy it. So every second of your life, there's all kinds of pathogens around, and you have these types of immune cells that are just knocking these things out every second of your life. But the story gets a little more sophisticated when we talk about the other part of the immune system, which is the adaptive immune system, which is extremely intriguing. So you know that, for instance, with COVID-19, you have these little spiky proteins on the outside of the virus. Well, these spiky proteins are called histocompatibility factors, but they're just little protein spikes that are sticking up. And it's those protein spikes that tell the immune cells, these particular cells don't belong in the body. They represent a threat. So upon the macrophages and the dendritic cells and neutrophils seeing a cell that has these weird spiky things on the surface, what they do, the macrophage will eat it, as an example, and so will dendritic cells. But then the macrophages and the dendritic cells will then take the spiky proteins that were on the virus, and then it'll stick it on its own cell. After it eats it, it'll stick it on its own cell surface, and it'll take it into the lymph tissue and show it to one of the T lymphocytes. Now, I said as you get older, your T lymphocytes become less intelligent. But one of the really important T lymphocytes is the CD4 cell, or the T helper cell. It's the quarterback of the whole immune system. If someone develops an HIV infection, it's the CD4 cell that gets infected. So the whole immune system shuts down, because without the CD4 cell acting as a quarterback, the team has no idea how to march down the field. So the macrophages, once they have these spiky proteins that they ingested, they take it to the CD4 cell when things are working properly, and they say, look what I found. And the CD4 cell says, where did you find that? Oh, well, it's over there in the lungs. There's this infection starting in the lungs, and here's what it looks like. So the CD4 cells, or the T helper cells, contact the beta lymphocytes, the sister lymphocytes, the B lymphocytes. It says, hey, when you see these particular spiky proteins, you need to build some antibodies that will attack it. So the beta lymphocytes, or the B lymphocytes, which will morph often into plasma cells, will start to produce all of these lymphocytes, and the lymphocytes will then attach themselves to the virus and create an incredible target for all the immune cells to come and knock the virus out. So when the immune system is working properly, this is what it does. And then when the infection gets to the end, when you've knocked out most of the virally infected particles, you don't have to keep fighting for the next 20 years. So then another type of T lymphocyte comes into the act, known as the Th cell, or the T suppressor cell, also known as the Treg cell, but it's all the same lymphocyte. It's a T8 lymphocyte. It comes in and says, okay, end the battle. The battle's over. Shut down. Lower the white blood cell count. Everything's back to normal. You don't need to have fever anymore. Everything comes back to normal. Now, when the battle doesn't end properly, sometimes after an infection, the immune cells start acting very erratically, and they morph into cells that then start to produce autoimmune disease, unfortunately. So that's one of the risks that can happen with any kind of infections, that if the battle doesn't end, then the immune cells start attacking the body's own normal cells. Otherwise, this really is what happens during an infection. So there are many factors that dictate how well your immune cells are going to do this, how well the innate cells are going to quickly just destroy things on contact, and how well the adaptive immune system is going to be able to form antibodies and react to the presentation of these spiky proteins that are being brought to the CD4 cell. And the things that really dictate how competent your immune system is at any given time is your age. Diet and alcohol have an effect. Certain supplements that we're going to talk about, physical activity, sleep, stress and depression, as you probably have guessed, certain comorbidity health conditions, many of which you know about, and certain drugs that people may be taking because they have to take the drugs. But some of those drugs weaken immunity and make people more prone to more serious virulent infections. So let's look at aging. By the time you're 55 or 60 years old, the immune system is definitely weaker. The thymus gland has undergone involution. So when the T lymphocytes come out of the bone marrow and they go to the thymus gland, there is no thymus gland. Some studies, as you're going to see, show that zinc can bring some of that thymus gland function back, but it can't bring it back to where you were at 19 years old. It's also the cumulative effect over time of free radical damage. The same way if I take an apple, I cut it in half and I expose it to the oxygen and air, oxygen is going to cause it to turn brown after a while. That's oxidative stress. Because we use oxygen for energy, we also slowly rot over time and our immune system becomes oxidized, just like the apple to some degree. So as we get older, our immune cells, even if they're there, sometimes they're not working. They don't even, there's immune cells there that are doing nothing. That's called immunosenescence. You have immune cells, but they're not really doing anything. And the other thing that happens after the age of 60 is that the neutrophils, which are so good at just engulfing a virus or a bacteria or a cancer cell or a fungus, ingesting it and just destroying it on the spot by secreting these peroxides and chemicals, that it needs vitamin C to do that. And as we get older, it's much harder for neutrophils to get vitamin C to go from the bloodstream into the neutrophil. So neutrophils become marginally deficient of the vitamin C they need, so they can't generate the same respiratory bursts. But clinical studies have shown that if you give people vitamin C at high enough doses, or people who are sick, if you give them intravenous vitamin C, that the neutrophil function starts to come back and they can start to fight viruses much more effectively, as you're going to see. In terms of diet and alcohol, immune system, did I miss a slide? No. Sugar, high blood sugar, eating a lot of refined sugars tends to suppress the ability of certain immune cells to make molecules that would destroy viruses. So, people with diabetes whose their blood sugar levels are higher, more prone to infection, more prone to more virulent infection. Alcohol also weakens the immune system. It's unfortunate that during the pandemic that people are drinking more, because it actually weakens the immune system. And it's in a dose weaker your immune system becomes, and the more damage there is, especially to lung tissue, making it an easier target for the virus. So this is not a good time really to be drinking alcohol. And to some degree, it's not just that you have to drink a lot. There seems to be an all or none effect that's in place. Just even having one alcoholic drink can momentarily, at least for a number of hours, weaken your immunity. The same with marijuana constituents like CBD and THC. They have some medicinal, but just be aware that studies show that one of the negative side effects of both of these agents is that they weaken the body's immune system. Physical activity is a great thing to do. Light to moderate activity stimulates the immune system function, which is wonderful. But if you overtrain, if you decide during the pandemic you're going to try to become, Superman or Superwoman and get into the best shape of your life, and you're overtraining, you actually weaken your immune system. For many hours after that heavy training, your body can't make optimal amounts of antibodies, so you're much more prone to becoming sick. A lot of athletes who train hard have much more respiratory tract infections during the course of the year than sedentary people. Overtraining actually can produce a negative effect, whereas light to moderate activity, not only does it help to improve immune function and reduce infection, it also helps to decrease depression and anxiety by about 25%. So it has this great mental health effect as well. Of course, smoking weakens the immune system. Not getting enough sleep. What happens when you sleep is that there's a shift in hormones, and the T lymphocytes that are made in the bone marrow come out into the bloodstream, and you get this new fresh recruits coming out while you're sleeping. If you're not sleeping enough, then the T lymphocytes are locked in the bone marrow, and you're relying the next day on old, worn out T lymphocytes that they can't fight because they're worn out and used up. And so your immune system becomes much more compromised. Of course, mental depression and stress have been shown to weaken the immune system, largely because you get more cortisol being released and other neurochemical changes that make the body's immune system weaker. There are certain nutrients that can also depress the immune system. Taking high doses of omega-3 fats above 2,000 milligrams a day is probably inadvisable during a pandemic. So as great as omega-3 fats are, you'd want to limit them from day to day at 2,000 milligrams right now. Green tea is not as much of an issue, but we're going to look at vitamin D. And what I will tell you out of the gate is that sometimes with vitamin D, less is more. Once your blood level of vitamin D is above 140 nanomoles per liter, you're now weakening your body's adaptive immune system. You can't make antibodies nearly as well, and you're much more prone to infection, as you'll see. So there's a sweet spot for vitamin D that I will show you. And certain drugs like prednisone that some people with autoimmune disease have to take, and some of the biologic drugs that people with Crohn's disease and rheumatoid arthritis are taking because it suppresses their inflammation. people that have had organ transplants that are on anti-rejection drugs. These drugs are weakening the immune system, which in turn increase the risk that they could develop infection. So it's not that these people need to go off these drugs. It's just, this is just the way that it is, and there's no way solution around that right now. Then there's comorbidity health problems. If you have these, high blood pressure, diabetes, even just being over 65, if you have cancer presently, people with chronic kidney disease or HIV infection, it increases risk of infection. Your immune system is more compromised, especially people with chronic kidney disease and HIV infection. When those individuals develop COVID-19, the mortality rates are much higher. So the proactive strategies to maintain a strong immune system come down to getting adequate sleep, don't overtrain, manage stress as best you can during this difficult time, and minimize and eliminate things that'll suppress your immune system, as we talked about, and optimize nutrients that support immune system function. And that's what I want to get to right now. So I want to cover these nutrients. Some of these nutrients, many of you have seen before. Some of you might be familiar with all of them, but I want to touch on them because each of them plays a significant role during our current circumstances. Let's start with vitamin C and immunity. So those neutrophils, which are the primary immune cells in your bloodstream, they require vitamin C to generate virus-killing respiratory bursts. So when they engulf that virus, they produce these killing peroxides or respiratory bursts that blow the virus up, or a cancer cell up, or a bacteria pathogen, blows it to smithereens. But it needs vitamin C to generate those respiratory bursts. And the problem that neutrophils have is they have to pump, they need more vitamin C than is normally available from just normal diffusion from the bloodstream. They have to pump vitamin C into themselves against what's called a concentration gradient, where they've got to try to get more vitamin. So they have these pumps to pump vitamin C in. But as you get older, that pump the vitamin C in becomes more sluggish. But studies show that if you can increase your vitamin C intake as you get older, you can still get those greater respiratory bursts. So with aging, that pump becomes much more sluggish. But studies show that higher intakes of vitamin C in older subjects can improve neutrophil function by enabling neutrophils to access more of the vitamin C. But you have to get your blood levels high enough. So vitamin C also protects neutrophils against free radicals, because the neutrophils are taking vitamin C and using it to generate peroxides that kill the virus. Those peroxides can also cause free radical damage to the neutrophil itself and destroy the neutrophil. So the neutrophil needs some of the vitamin C to also act as an antioxidant to protect itself. The same way, if I cut an apple in half and I expose it to the oxygen and air, but if I take lemon juice and I squeeze lemon juice on that part of the apple, you know that the vitamin C in the lemon juice is going to slow down the rate at which the apple turns brown, because vitamin C is an antioxidant. Same thing inside the neutrophil. The vitamin C is acting to also protect the neutrophil itself against the free radicals that it's generating. Vitamin C also helps the neutrophils move to the site of infection. It strengthens the barrier in the lungs so viruses can't penetrate nearly as well, same in the intestinal tract. It also supports certain functions of the B lymphocytes and the T lymphocytes. And vitamin C gets turned over much faster during an infection, because the immune system is relying on vitamin C so much that as soon as you get an infection, the vitamin C turnover rate is very quick. You can easily become vitamin C depleted. And as soon as you have a suboptimal vitamin C status within your neutrophils, then unfortunately, neutrophils run the risk of producing what's called netosis. So that stands for neutrophil extravascular traps, which I'm going to show you. And this often is what triggers what's known as the cytokine storm, that is the life-ending event for someone with a severe infection. So often it's not the virus that's killing the person, it's how the body's immune system is responding to the virus. So when you look at a neutrophil that you see in front of you here, you'll see that it engulfs the virus or the pathogen and secretes these reactive oxygen species to destroy it. You need vitamin C to do that, and that'll destroy it. At the same time, it does release some of these what are called neutrophil extravascular traps or nets, which can also act like a mesh and capture some viruses that are outside in the bloodstream and in the tissues and destroy it there. But if the vitamin C levels run too low, then you start secreting way too many of these neutrophil extravascular traps or nets, and you end up producing a tremendous amount of inflammation. that is called the cytokine storm that can be life-ending. So the neutrophil requires optimal vitamin C from day to day to prevent an infection and then to fight it effectively and to help to reduce cytokine storm. In a situation where there's enough vitamin C, as the neutrophil gets worn out, it'll be taken out of the circulation normally and it doesn't pose a threat. But when you have insufficient vitamin C, that's when the neutrophil gets broken down, it goes through necrosis, which produces inflammation. Or much worse, it produces netosis, where it's secreting all of these neutrophil extravascular traps. And that is a major trigger that sets off the cytokine storm that is often the life-ending event in people with serious critical infections. So studies show that to optimize immune system function in healthy young people, they need about 100 to 250 milligrams of vitamin C a day. That gets people who are otherwise healthy to an ideal blood level of vitamin C, which is 50 micromoles per liter. But for older individuals, the requirement to get your blood level into that range is usually about 1,000 milligrams a day. And you need to add vitamin E because vitamin E helps to protect these immune cells from free radical damage and optimize their function, especially as people get older. So this is why in that journal article that I showed you from Frontiers of Immunology, they said the recommended dietary allowance is too low for certain things like vitamin C and vitamin E when it comes to immunity or optimizing immune system function. So vitamin C is required for all these neutrophil functions. To get the neutrophil to go to the site of infection, which is called chemotaxis, to improve its phagocytosis, actually eat the invader, generate the respiratory burst to kill it, and to produce some level of netosis, and to prevent the buildup of netosis. You want to decrease neutrophil extravascular traps, or you're headed for a cytokine storm. So this review article basically reviews the same thing, also bringing into fact the other sort of chemicals that vitamin C is required for immune cells to produce, like interferon, things you've heard of before. So do most people have optimal vitamin C status for optimal immunity? The answer is no. That in North America, low vitamin C blood levels are very common. 40% of the US population have vitamin C blood levels below 23 micromoles per liter. What they said is you need to be above 50. And a lot of people are below 23. It's also the fourth leading nutrient deficiency in the US. When your blood level of vitamin C is below 11, you're in a severe deficient state. It's the fourth leading nutrient deficiency just in the United States alone. But 40% of the population have low vitamin C, and 88% of people don't meet the RDA for vitamin E, which is already set too low, especially for people who are getting older. And very importantly, higher levels of vitamin C, 1,000 milligrams a day, have been shown to prevent the decline in vitamin C depletion within white blood cells during an infection, because the turnover rate is going to be faster. So has vitamin C supplementation been shown to help fight viral infections? Well, the answer is yes. Long before COVID-19 came along, there's the hospital studies showing if you take elderly people with pneumonia, have very severe disease, and you give them vitamin C supplements compared to the group who get the placebo, the group who get the vitamin C recover much more effectively, faster. The hospital stay is less. And it's not just the placebo effect. You see that on chest x-ray, the chest x-ray clears, the temperature comes down, and other signs of infection start to decline, like with the ESR, as it's called. And all they gave these people were 1,600 milligrams of vitamin C. It's not that much, but you can't get that much from food. So based on studies that had been evolving over many years, when COVID-19 first hit Wuhan, China, the Chinese researchers are familiar with this research. So they said, one of the things we want to test against COVID-19 is intravenous vitamin C as a therapy to see if it helps. And they said, it helps. So they showed data to the rest of the world when COVID-19 started to spread around the globe. They told other countries in their sort of Shanghai consensus report, we're recommending that here's how you treat COVID-19. And one of the things we're suggesting that you do is that you give people intravenous, if they have COVID-19 and they're hospitalized, you give them an IV of vitamin C that's infused over a 24-hour period at a specific dose, because we saw from our own studies that none of those patients died and their duration of illness was significantly lower. So on February 3rd, the National Institutes of Health, in that review paper, they said, well, when it comes to vitamin C, here's what we're seeing. That, for healthy people, they probably need about 100 milligrams of vitamin C a day to maintain plasma levels that are great. But higher doses 1,000 to 3,000 grams are required for critically ill people in ICUs. So are people who are critically ill getting this vitamin C? I haven't heard any. If they are, no one's told me about it. Indeed, vitamin C deficiency appears to be common on COVID-19 patients. Not only that, but having enough vitamin C helps to decrease the risk of those clots. Everyone's worried about blood clots now. The microthrombi and the coagulopathy, all these blood clotting issues and inflammation in the blood vessel wall seems to be able to be prevented through optimal vitamin C status. It's also reduced other indicators of clots, what are called the reduced D dimer levels. So they're saying preliminary evidence suggests that vitamin C status and vitamin C administration may be relevant to COVID-19 outcomes. So they said, in China, it worked very well. So there are a number of vitamin C clinical trials going on right now during the pandemic, but I will tell you that, if you're going to wait around for these long-term studies to be published, the pandemic will be over by the time they publish anything. It seems obvious, at least to me, that you want to maintain optimal vitamin C blood levels, and you're going to need more than just the recommended dietary allowance. So these are factors that deplete vitamin C from the body. If you live in a place where there's air pollution, smoking, being overweight, cardiovascular risk factors, diabetes, anybody with autoimmune disease or chronic inflammation, infections, malignancy, drinking caffeinated beverages, drinking any alcohol, stress is a factor. If you're doing aerobic exercise, you're depleting vitamin C, is being turned over at a faster rate. So we all have some of these factors in our lives. So just relying on vitamin C from food alone right now, to me, I don't think it's the smartest thing. So I'll just tell you what I have done. So in the Adeeva all-in-one multivitamin that I created back in the 90s, it has 1,000 milligrams of vitamin D over the course of the day, and it's divided up into doses, so you're getting 500 milligrams at a time. During the pandemic, I don't think that's even enough. I add another 500 milligrams of vitamin C on 2 separate occasions during the day. What you want is those neutrophils to always have access to the vitamin C 24 hours a day to generate respiratory bursts, protect themselves, and prevent netosis from occurring. An important note here, though, is that ingesting more than 500 milligrams of vitamin C at any given time sort of defeats the purpose, because after 500 milligrams of ingestion at any given time, the amount of vitamin C absorption is significantly attenuated. So if you take 1,000 milligrams at a time, the first 500 milligrams are getting absorbed to a large degree. The second 500 milligrams just going to stay in your intestinal tract and not get absorbed. There's sort of an upper limit to how much you can absorb at one time. So spreading out your vitamin C intake over the course of the day is what's recommended. The first sign of an upper respiratory tract infection, I would consider taking up to 4,000 to 5,000 milligrams of vitamin C a day to really optimize vitamin C availability to the immune cells, because the turnover rate of vitamin C is much faster. And so the vitamin C research that we talk about today really stems from this guy back in the 1940s, this medical doctor, Dr. Klenner, who in 1948 published some of the first papers showing that vitamin C has these great effects on, some of them are actually not only supporting the immune system, but also direct antiviral effects. So thank goodness for, the Salk polio virus and other and vaccines rather that have come along, in recent times. But before those things were available, you had Klenner using high dose vitamin C via intravenous to actually treat a series of very common viruses that can be very lethal, and having some very good success with it. So it was based on Klenner's original findings that we then moved into people like Linus Pauling and then all the research that we see in hospitals today and what they did in Wuhan, China. But this guy was really the first researcher to publish data showing vitamin C not only supports the immune system, it has direct antiviral effects. Vitamin E and immunity. Well, vitamin E protects immune cells from free radical damage. So as the immune cells are generating free radicals to kill viruses and bacteria, they also have to protect themselves against those same free radicals, and vitamin E really helps to do that. Vitamin E also helps to prevent the buildup of a dangerous chemical called PG2, which weakens the immune system to a significant degree. So the long and the short of all the research shows that, especially as people get older, they need 100 to 400 IUs a day to decrease upper respiratory tract infections. And you also see in older people, it improves objective measurements, not just that they decrease their infection incidence, but you actually, when you measure the immune system behavior, see the immune system is working at a much higher level in older subjects if they have more vitamin E. You can't get that much vitamin E from eating food. Then there's zinc and immunity. So zinc, the mineral zinc affects many aspects of the immune system. So the T lymphocytes and the B lymphocytes and the macrophages are very dependent upon zinc to give them sort of nutritional support so they can kill viruses. And also zinc deficiency also causes some of the shriveling up of the thymus gland, because we see that when you give people zinc supplementation, sometimes their thymus gland function starts to improve. And we've seen a decreased incidence and severity of upper respiratory tract infections in older subjects who are given zinc supplementation. But the question is, how much zinc do you give somebody? And this is the tricky part. It's kind of like vitamin D. Sometimes less is more. So some people go crazy and they start taking these super mega doses of zinc, which really is a mistake. Too much zinc actually impairs the immune system and increases the risk of hospitalization due to urinary tract infections. But zinc deficiency also is known to weaken the immune system. So you need to find the sweet spot. And the evidence really points to, if you're just doing something as basic as getting 15 milligrams of zinc each day, just from a standard multiple vitamin, you're probably right in the sweet spot, because human studies show that long-term supplementation with 10 to 20 milligrams of zinc improves the immune system's ability to ward off infections. Now, in some studies where people already have an infection, giving them high doses of zinc, 60 to 90 milligrams every day for 7 to 10 days, sometimes helps their immune system fight a little bit better and decrease the severity of the infection. So that's a high dose of zinc. That's not something that I would recommend to somebody without having physician supervision. But there is evidence like that, and I've given you all the references here if you want to go and look that up. The sad tragedy for me is that in North America, 55% of adults at least don't get the recommended amount of zinc. So the recommended amount of zinc each day is 15 milligrams. The average North American adult gets about 11 milligrams. People over the age of 71 are getting only on average 8 milligrams a day. So people are getting close to the zinc RDA, but they're not quite getting there. But over weeks to months to years, you end up with a marginal zinc deficiency, which most people have, by the way. And that can be corrected just by taking a good high potency multivitamin with 15 milligrams of zinc. In North America, 30% of elderly people have moderate zinc deficiency. And other groups are also very, very susceptible. Black Americans, Mexican Americans, sort of young women, sort of childbearing age, all prone to more prone to more serious zinc deficiency. But this marginal zinc deficiency that most people actually have, not only does it manifest itself by having decreased immune function, so older people, their zinc deficiency status is not great, their thymus gland's not working very well, their T cells are not very intelligent, they're more prone to infection. And when they get infections, the infections are more virulent and life-threatening, whether it's pneumonia or COVID-19, it doesn't matter. They're prone, any infection is more lethal once you're compromised to this degree. But zinc is also required to maintain normal taste bud function. So what do people complain about as they get older? If I get sick, it's more severe. I can't taste my food anymore. Their eyes don't adapt very well to darkness. You turn out the lights and they can't see for a long period of time, because you need zinc in the retina for dark adaptation. And they lose their muscle mass quickly because you need zinc to produce certain hormones that maintain your lean mass, namely insulin-like growth factor 1. And they bang their leg against the coffee table and there's a bruise there, and the bruise is there for like 9 months. It's like, how come this bruise is still here? I don't know. That's just the way, just getting older. That's just the way it is. That's not the way it is. You have a zinc deficiency because you need zinc for wound healing as well. That's why a lot of these lesions that people have on their skin when they get older, if they use an ointment with zinc, it heals it. But that's just evidence that they have an underlying zinc deficiency to start with. So that marginal zinc deficiency that most people have in adult life due to poor intake is really starts to catch up with individuals over time. And during a pandemic, you want zinc status to be more optimal. So there's a great review article in 2020, The Potential Impact of Zinc Supplementation on COVID-19 Pathogenesis, a fantastic review article in the Frontiers of Immunology. So what did the National Institute of Health say this year in February about zinc and COVID-19? They said, well, what we're noticing, what a big surprise, that people whose their zinc blood levels are lower than 80 micrograms per deciliter, they have more COVID-19 with more complications and prolonged hospital stays. Of course, their immune cells need zinc to fight, and they don't have it. They also know that zinc, when you give people zinc, it can stop the virus from mutating within your body. What's the problem we have now? That the COVID-19 virus is mutating in people's bodies. You're getting new variants, and then people are coughing and sneezing that out into the environment, breathing it into the environment. Now we have new variants. Zinc and selenium, as you will see, help to block viruses from mutating within your body, including this virus, the COVID-19 virus. So they're saying, I think zinc is actually quite important. What about the mineral selenium? Well, like zinc, selenium also helps to support the immune system in various ways. We see animal studies, if you make animals deficient in selenium, they get all kinds of infections. But it's reversible as soon as you give them selenium. And like vitamin D, selenium supplementation has been shown to slow the progression of HIV infection in humans. So in humans who are infected with the HIV virus, selenium supplementation and vitamin D is part of the concurrent therapy to help slow the replication of the virus. And the selenium also helps to decrease viruses from mutating and replicating within the body. And it's been shown to inhibit the life-threatening cytokine storm in experimental studies and decreasing clots in COVID-19 patients. These are all extremely important features. It's been shown to enhance the efficacy of the polio virus. And selenium has many anti-cancer properties, which we won't get into today. I spelled the word animal wrong, I see that. So what about selenium and COVID-19? Well, studies in China, Germany, and Sweden have now shown that when people's selenium status is compromised, their mortality rates from COVID-19 are much higher. So in China, they're saying recovery rates are 3 times greater in areas of China where selenium nutritional status is superior. In Germany, they're saying the same thing. We look at selenium nutritional status in the blood. We're saying people that have low blood selenium, man, their mortality rates are much higher. And in Sweden, they're saying most of our elderly people are selenium deficient, and they end up in the intensive care. When we give them supplementation, we give selenium supplementation to institutionalized elderly prophylactically, they have much fewer infections throughout the year. So the recommended dietary allowance for selenium is set at 55 micrograms per deciliter. And most people get that much selenium from food. The problem is that to optimize immune system function, as they're saying in Sweden, and I agree with this, people need to be getting 200 micrograms of selenium a day, because that level has been shown, especially in elderly people, to have a positive effect on lowering viral infection rates and also cardiovascular disease mortality. And a study that was just published very recently, giving people selenium and coenzyme Q10, it reduced cardiovascular mortality by 40%. These things work synergistically, but they're saying we've had a lot of experience over the years giving people selenium for many years. There are no side effects from it, but you get all these positive outcomes, decrease infections, decrease cardiovascular risk, especially if it's combined with coenzyme Q10. That's a different story. What about vitamin D and immunity? Well, on this slide, this is one slide that summarizes everything you need to know. That you want to have a vitamin D status in your blood that's above 75 or 80 nanomoles per liter. When you do that, your innate immune cells, like your macrophages, can synthesize the types of little antimicrobial chemicals that will pierce a hole right in the virus and blow it up on contact. So macrophages sometimes don't have to ingest the virus. They can just take a pin and stick a hole in the virus and blow it up. But in order for the innate immune cell to do that, you need vitamin D to prompt, to sort of stimulate the genes of the immune cells to actually manufacture these chemicals. You need at least 75 to 80 nanomoles per liter. Now in Canada, if you ask your doctor if your vitamin D level is okay, as long as it's over 50 nanomoles per liter, they'll say that's fine. But that's with respect to bone density. Vitamin D, of course, helps with bone density, preventing osteoporosis. But in order to optimize immune system function, at 50 or 60 or 65, it's not enough. You need to get to 75 to 80, as you will see. On the other hand, if your vitamin D blood levels go too high, above 140, then it inhibits key aspects of the adaptive immune system. You can't make antibodies and you can't generate the types of cytokines to fight an infection. Now, if you're already facing a cytokine storm and they want to give you massive amounts of vitamin D to curtail the cytokine storm, that's a different story. But from day to day, what you want is to be in the sweet spot between 80 and 140 nanomoles per liter. When you do that, you've got an immune system day to day that's really going to help to protect you in a big way. So as I said, the vitamin D is required by the innate immune cells to make these antimicrobial peptides like cathalicin that puncture a hole right in the virus on contact, blow it up. Giving people very high levels of vitamin D in a single dose actually decreases the antibody production and tones down key cytokines that are needed to fight an infection. Now, where can that be helpful? People that have autoimmune disease, where the adaptive immune system is already going haywire and attacking the body's own healthy tissue, in Crohn's disease, multiple sclerosis as an example, they give people very high doses of vitamin D and it pulls the immune system back. Well, that's good for them. But generally, for everyone else who's trying to ward off infection, that's not necessarily a good game plan. So it's very helpful to know your vitamin D blood level to begin with. So that's for most people in Canada, you're going to get to an optimal vitamin D blood level usually by taking 1,000 to 2,000 IUs of vitamin D a day. Probably most of you are doing that. Now, remember that you make vitamin D from sunlight, but between October and May, the wavelengths from the sun that reach the earth, even on a hot sunny day, those wavelengths that make vitamin D in your skin don't reach the earth's surface in this part of the world between October and May. So during the winter months, it's impossible just about to maintain optimal vitamin D blood levels without supplementing with vitamin D, unless you're having sardines and crackers every day. If your blood level of vitamin D goes above 250 nanomoles per liter, and because some people during the pandemic are taking these massive amounts of vitamin D, you can end up with vitamin D toxicity where you start calcifying your internal organs, and that's a life-threatening condition. So this is not candy to play with. So vitamin D, shown here, the two different forms of vitamin D, the one coming from the liver and the one that's also made in the kidneys, will enter into the immune cells. And there's a vitamin D transporter or a receptor that brings the vitamin D right to the DNA of your cell, speaks right to your genes, right to the genetic code. And it tells certain genes to turn on that are going to produce certain products that those genes will make in order to make the immune system work in a more effective way. So vitamin D acts very much more like a hormone. So in recent years, there's been these great studies reviewing vitamin D's role in rheumatic diseases, autoimmune diseases. And these are some of the references I've used so far. And this takes us to vitamin D and COVID-19 studies specifically. So in April of 2020, if you're watching television, you probably saw the first report saying, when people have low vitamin D levels in certain countries where their vitamin D is low, the COVID-19 seems to be claiming more lives. The mortality rates are higher in Italy and Spain and the UK, where vitamin D levels are lower. So these researchers from Northwestern University were the ones that actually did the studies in these different countries, led by Dr. Bachman. And what he said was, the hypothesis, well, of course, COVID-19 is more severe in certain places because the healthcare system is not as good. The way they're testing is different. There's not enough testing going on. And he said, after I looked at all of this data, I can tell you that none of these factors have played a significant role. In Northern Italy, the healthcare system is much better than it is in many other parts of Europe, but the mortality rate's very high. He said, what we're seeing that is the most consistent finding around the globe is that where we see low vitamin D levels, we see much higher COVID-19 mortality. And I will tell you, I have a friend who's a nurse practitioner down at Mount Sinai Hospital in Toronto, who's actually right in the thick of the pandemic. And at the outset of the pandemic, I said to her, they're probably going to find what they found during the SARS epidemic in 2003, that people with low blood vitamin D levels are much more prone to the serious outcomes. And that's almost what's starting to surface here again. So who's at risk for low vitamin D? Well, people who are elderly, right? People who are in their 80s, because even if they're exposed to sunlight, their skin doesn't make vitamin D to the same degree, and their kidneys don't make the more potent form of vitamin D that it used to make when you were younger. And you can be someone sitting by a window pane and sunlight can come in on a nice summer day, and that can give you a sunburn and cause skin cancer, but the window pane is actually filtering out the wavelength that's necessary to make vitamin D. So it's the worst of all situations. You have an institutionalized elderly person indoors, breathing that stale air, sitting by a window, getting waves coming through the window that can actually damage their skin and produce a melanoma, but blocking the type of wavelength that's required to make vitamin D. Also, people who have darker skin, who have more melanin in their skin, it acts as a sunscreen, the same way if you're putting on sunscreen on your skin. That's what darker skinned people have naturally. And so as you have more and more African Americans and people from the Caribbean and other places who are now living in parts of the world where it's a colder climate and there's less sunlight activity, they have a much harder time getting their vitamin D levels up. So people with darker skin tend to have lower vitamin D levels unless they're taking supplements, especially between October and May. And people who are overweight, because vitamin D is fat soluble. So if you put vitamin D into your body and your fat cells are large, a lot of the vitamin D is going to get stored in your fat tissue. It's not going to circulate through your bloodstream where the immune cells can get access to it. So people who are overweight often need to take more vitamin D to get their blood level into the sweet spot between 80 and 140 nanomoles per liter. The same is true if there's chronic inflammation, which often occurs in type 2 diabetes, where there's a background inflammatory condition that's part of type 2 diabetes. The vitamin D gets turned over at a faster rate. In autoimmune patients, the vitamin D gets turned over at a faster rate because there's a background inflammatory condition. These people are all at greater risk. So the authors of the study proposed that whereas optimizing vitamin D levels will certainly benefit bone and muscle health, the data suggests it'll likely to reduce serious COVID-19 complications. And I personally agree with that. This may be because vitamin D is important in regulating and suppressing the inflammatory cytokine response and causes the severe consequences of COVID-19 and acute respiratory distress syndrome associated with ventilation and death. So when your vitamin D levels are low, you're wide open. So then the Seneca researchers said, well, how low are these vitamin D blood levels? So they actually went into Spain and they said, look at this, older people in Spain. Remember what I told you? You want a blood level between 80 and 140 nanomoles per liter. In Spain, older people, here's their blood level, on average 26. In Italy, older people, 28. Whereas in the Nordic countries, which are further north, the levels are higher. Why is that? Because they know when you're that far away from the equator, that you're not making enough vitamin D, you're going to end up with rickets or osteomalacia. Your kids are going to have all kinds of bone deformities. So they tell their citizens, take cod liver oil, take vitamin D supplements. They fortify their dairy products with vitamin D. So their levels are higher, and the impact of COVID-19 has been less. You look in Italy, 76% of women over the age of 70 years old, their blood levels are below 30 nanomoles. This is disgraceful. Who are the public health officials that would allow this to happen in the first place? The researchers say that vitamin D deficiency is a major public health problem worldwide, and it is, especially people over the age of 70, because they get less sunlight, they make less vitamin D. Vitamin D status is especially poor in institutionalized people. Who was in the first round of COVID-19? Who was hit the hardest? 75% of them being severely vitamin D deficient with blood levels below 25 nanomoles per liter. This, to me, because of my background in nutritional medicine, is disgraceful. Now they're saying, how come in the Southern European countries, how come their blood levels aren't higher? They're closer to the equator. But culturally, the people who live in Southern European countries tend to stay in the shade. Having a tan is very uncool. So even though there's more sunlight, they don't take advantage of it. In Northern Europe, they know their vitamin D levels are low. They know they're prone to osteomalacia, rickets, and osteoporosis. So they're told by the government, they're educated on vitamin D for bone health, and that's now translating into better protection against infection currently. So based on all of this, because Spain really got hit hard in the beginning, a Spanish hospital said, let's just undertake a study. We'll take the next 76 patients that arrive here who we test who have positive COVID-19, who have to be hospitalized, and we're going to give 50 of them vitamin D supplementation every single day, and we're going to give 26 of them a placebo. Let's see what happens. And we're going to do it in a random way so there's no doctor bias. And they're saying, oh my goodness, of the 26 people that didn't get the vitamin D, half of them ended up in the intensive care unit and 4 of them died. Of the 50 patients that got the vitamin D supplementation, only 1 needed to go to intensive care and none of them died. They're saying, wow, that's remarkable. So based on that study, they're saying we're now undertaking a large multi-clinical trial study of 15 hospitals. So there's a new study underway where they're doing the same thing in 15 different hospitals in Spain. So what did the National Institute of Health have to say on February 3rd about vitamin D in COVID-19? They said this: each degree of latitude north of 28 degrees. So where's the 28 degree latitude? Basically, it's at sort of a lower point in the state of Texas, just almost the Baja area of California, right? So it's far away from where we are. They're saying that with each degree latitude north above 28, there's a corresponding 4.4% increase in COVID-19 mortality. So you look at these states that have a lot of sunlight and you see, oh, there's a lot of COVID-19 cases. They didn't close them down. The governor's made a huge mistake. Maybe they did, but the death rates are much lower because people's blood levels of vitamin D are much higher. So if you look at where I live in Toronto at the 40th degree latitude, COVID-19 mortality risk is like 70% higher here because people's vitamin D levels are so pathetic. We just don't get enough sunlight to make vitamin D naturally. So unless you're supplementing, you're really asking for trouble. And they're showing that where vitamin D levels are low, it's also associated with more of these inflammatory markers that are linked to a greater risk of cytokine storm in COVID-19. Then in India, India is a disaster at the moment. They're saying, in India, the people who are having the real fatal effects of COVID-19 have these really low vitamin D blood levels down around 15 nanomoles. Who has a blood level of 15 nanomoles per liter? Whereas the people in India with a blood level of vitamin D around 70 nanomoles, not bad, much more asymptomatic. They might get the infection, but they're mostly asymptomatic, and they don't have severe disease for the most part. So they're saying we're seeing all kinds of evidence for vitamin D. So in England, they said, I think we better start telling our people, and Scotland as well, that people who are at high risk for vitamin D deficiency, we should be telling them to start taking vitamin D. So they started to do that. And then in 2020, and just recently in November of 2020, the UK government said, listen, we're actually going to make vitamin D supplements available free to people living in care homes across England. We're going to give them a 4-month supply to get them through the winter. They're only giving them 400 IUs a day, which really is not good enough. A lot of people think, but it's a start. Let's put it that way. And then in Germany, that was published February of 2021, so very recently as well in molecular oncology, they said, not only is vitamin D good for, fighting infection and great immunity, but also because vitamin D has some direct anti-cancer effects, which are beyond the scope of this discussion, that if we gave all of our citizens 1,000 IUs of vitamin D every single day, we would be able to cut cancer rates by 13%. So they said if all Germans over the age of 50 were to take vitamin D supplements at 1,000 IUs a day, up to 30,000 cancer deaths per year would be avoided, and more than 300,000 years of life could be gained, in addition to healthcare costs that would be saved. So they said, but we want to administer 1,000 IUs a day. That's what we're recommending the government does. And if they do it, they're saying, there'll be 13% fewer cancers, but it also saves the healthcare system over 250 million euros in care for patients who develop the disease. They're saying it's cost effective. After you factor in the cost of vitamin D, which is pretty cheap, and we give everybody vitamin D at 1,000 IUs a day who's over the age of 50, we'd be saving ourselves healthcare dollars and saving lives at the same time. So then in March, just a little over a month ago, March 21, the United States Endocrine Society, these are endocrinologists gathering for their annual meeting, but they're doing it now remotely. They're saying, listen, we've seen all kinds of evidence showing that vitamin D is important. Even if you give hospitalized patients vitamin D, it helps them even, as an intervention, it's not just a correlation anymore. So then they did a study where they looked at 124 adults who were diagnosed with low vitamin D 90 days prior to them to contracting COVID-19. And the ones that were given vitamin D supplements, didn't develop didn't have COVID-19 deaths. The ones who were vitamin D deficient and the doctors didn't bother to give them vitamin D or recommend it, their incidence was much higher. So they found that patients who were supplemented with at least 1,000 IUs of vitamin D a week, which is not that much, were less likely to be mechanically ventilated or to die following hospital admission for COVID-19. They also found that half of the patients with low vitamin D levels who should have been recommended to take vitamin D supplements by their doctor We're never told to do so. So there's a breakdown in the communication somewhere. So then just last month, the Spanish Society of Geriatrics and Gerontologists, who are seeing these elderly people, they're saying, look, here's our position statement on vitamin D. We know that vitamin D is necessary to do all these great things for the immune system. It's not even in debate anymore. And so they're saying, and we've seen evidence to show that it could be useful both in the prevention of COVID-19 and the treatment of COVID-19. So they go on to say preliminary studies have shown that vitamin D supplementation is useful for people that are hospitalized with COVID-19. Other studies have shown that it decreases the severity of the condition. Other studies have shown that people who are given vitamin D when their levels were lower, end up having better outcomes. And they tend to have fewer clots. If you give them the vitamin D, they tend not to form these abnormal clots. So they go on and on. So they say based on our findings and the findings worldwide, these are the recommendations we have. If someone is now in Spain, is diagnosed with COVID-19, they're saying, here's how much vitamin D we recommend they take orally based on what their blood level of vitamin D is. If their blood level of vitamin D is very low, if it's at 25 and they develop COVID-19, this is the protocol. We give them 7,000 IUs a day for the first 8 weeks and 3,500 IUs a day for the next 8 weeks. If their level's a little bit higher than that at 27.5, there's the protocol. If their blood levels are higher, not as much. Blood levels are higher, they don't need as much. So they created this sort of template as to when you're diagnosed with COVID-19, how much vitamin D should you be taking? So to be quite honest with you, they're guessing what to do. But they're saying the biological plausibility is that this is actually very likely to be helpful based on the evidence that we have to date, plus the intervention studies that we've seen so far. So it goes back to what I said about the Lancet review that happened just about a month ago. They said during a pandemic, you don't have time for these, 4-year long-term trials to go all the way through to completion. You have to change the rules and do things that look like they're prudent and the risk is very low and the benefit to risk greatly favors the benefit. What about probiotics? I know many of you are probably taking probiotics, these sort of living microorganisms, sort of different bacteria and yeast that become part of the gut microflora, the sort of the friendly gut bacteria in the gut. So we know that probiotic supplementation has been shown to enhance the phagocytic capacity. So I showed you how macrophage will actually eat a virus. Well, that's called phagocytosis. So that activity is increased with probiotic supplementation. It also increases the ability of the B cells to make antibodies, which are called immunoglobulins, and enhances the gut barrier so less infections can penetrate. It's also been shown to increase the type of antibodies that line the respiratory tract, which is immunoglobulin A. So these are very important features. So there was a great review article in Current Opinions in Gastroenterology. They're saying probiotics have shown therapeutic potential for many diseases, including allergy, eczema, viral infection, and also if you get vaccinated with like the influenza vaccine, you have a much better response and you're much more prone to influenza during that winter because the probiotics have actually enhanced the efficacy of the vaccine. Researchers cite studies showing that probiotics regulate our innate and our adaptive immune response by modulating the functions of dendritic cells, macrophages, and the T and the B lymphocytes. They all get sort of a kick to the next level of not just boosting their function, because sometimes if you boost the function, that's a mistake. You can end up with an autoimmune disease. But bringing the cells into a greater level of efficiency and competency to respond appropriately to the circumstances. So the Cochrane review of 12 large clinical trials involving almost 4,000 patients, over a 10-year period in 8 different countries, they said probiotics were found to be more effective than placebo, reducing the number of participants who experience episodes of acute upper respiratory tract infections by 47% and the duration of an episode almost by 2 days shorter. Also reducing antibiotic use and lost school sick days for kids. People who are older don't necessarily get fewer upper respiratory tract infections when they take probiotics, but the duration and the severity is often less. Whereas in children, you see a dramatic reduction in upper respiratory tract infections with probiotics. And they've been found to be, very safe to take overall. The question is, what combination of probiotics do you take? So I went and looked at all the different studies that they were citing. And, if you ever look at probiotics in a drugstore or health food store, you see there's all these different strains of lactobacillus and bifidus and different types of yeast and bacteria. So what I did for you in this slide, because you'll receive these slides after, showed you these are the living microorganisms, the friendly bacteria, if you will, that seem to, in all those studies, seem to be the ones that were used to produce all these fantastic outcomes of reducing upper respiratory tract infections and modulating the immune system in a way that's very positive. So I think what you do is you look for a probiotic that has sort of a mixture of these types of species and try to get 2 to 10 billion living organisms a day into your body as sort of a strategy of using probiotics. That's what I have done personally. There's other immune superstars that I would like to touch on very briefly. They are medicinal mushrooms, astragalus, milk thistle, and the indole 3-carbinol. I'm going to sort of combine them all together, if you will. So there's these types of mushrooms, right? Not the standard button mushroom that you would eat, or oyster mushrooms, but there are these medicinal mushrooms that have these real medicinal properties, like reishi and shiitake and maitake and cordyceps and turkey tail. Inside those mushrooms, you have a very significant concentration of these active constituents known as the beta-D glucans, and also these triterpenoids. But these beta-D glucans are incredible because just through millions of years of evolution, are the macrophages in our intestinal tract. Remember, the macrophages were originally monocytes. They morphed into macrophages, and lots of them spread out throughout the body, including in the intestinal tract. And when you swallow medicinal mushrooms, those beta-glucan particles, once they get broken up, will fit right into the macrophage itself and enter the macrophage. And then the macrophage does some incredible things that helps to optimize the immune system in general. So you get this incredible heightened response where the immune system just works much more efficiently to fight viruses, bacteria, and even cancer cells. So one researcher stated, medicinal mushrooms have been shown to have the ability to stimulate the immune system, modulate humoral and cellular immunity. That means blood-based immunity and tissue immunity, and potentiate or sort of amplify anti-mutagenic and anti-tumorigenic, sort of anti-cancer properties, as well as rejuvenating the immune system weakened by radiotherapy and chemotherapy. Any cancer patient will tell you after you go through radiotherapy or chemotherapy, your immune system has sort of been destroyed for a while. One of the things that can bring it back very quickly is the ingestion of medicinal mushrooms. So here's how they work. It's a remarkable strategy that sort of is part of human evolution. So as these beta glucans come in from medicinal mushrooms in the gut, they enter into the macrophage, right? These white blood cells will eat them. And then the macrophage does a wild thing. It spits out fragments of the beta glucans that fit perfectly into the receptors and other immune cells. It makes the other immune cells much more intelligent. So the overall effect is that the beta glucan attaches to the receptor of the immune cell, and it activates them. And so now you have a much better response to any pathogen or sort of virus, bacteria, cancer cell, fungus that's trying to attack the body. The body's response is going to be as much more effective and efficient, and your immune system is much more competent under the influence of beta glucans. So we could spend a whole 3 or 4 hours just talking about medicinal mushrooms, but if you're interested in the subject, as I have been, these 3 review articles are absolutely spectacular to take a look at. Then there's the herbal agent known as astragalus. So at the Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center, they cite the study showing that medicinal constituents from astragalus boost immune system competency, and they exert direct antiviral effects. In the 2012 review, they say astragalus enhances immune system function, including boosting the release of interferon and interleukin-2 from key immune cells, which are well-established strong boosters of immune function. When your body's trying to fight off an infection, you need the immune cells to be right at the top of their game. Astragalus can help to keep them at the top of the game. Same with milk thistle, another herbal agent. A lot of people think about milk thistle as something that helps to support liver function, and it does do that quite well. But the active ingredient in milk thistle, which is known as selenium, a flavonoid, has been shown to increase the lymphocyte prolificity. Beta lymphocytes and the T lymphocytes can actually multiply and divide at a faster rate, and boost the important secretion of immune modulating chemicals that help them fight infections at a level that is more pronounced. So the researchers there studies uncovered a novel effect of milk thistle on the immune system. This immunostimulatory effect may be a benefit in increasing immunity to infectious diseases. So, to preventing infection, especially as you get older, these nutrients become important, as well as the indole-3 carbinol. So you can get that from cruciferous vegetables, broccoli, Brussels sprouts, cabbage, cauliflower, bok choy, turnips. What makes them unique is that they have this indole-3 carbinol, which enhances detoxification, but it also has effects on stimulating the immune system and making it work more intelligently, as you're reading on this slide. So essentially, the indole-3 carbinol will enter into certain immune cells, get transported right to the nucleus via what's known as the aryl receptor. And once it gets there, it boosts immune system function in a number of ways. So this is research I've been following for a long time. So many years ago, when I turned 50, because that's when your immune system really starts to become compromised if you're not careful, I made this product for myself. It's Adëeva Immuno-Detox Prime. And it has the standardized grade and dosage of reishi mushroom extract, astragalus, milk thistle, and the indole-3 carbinol all in one. Normally, I tell people over the age of 50 to take 2 capsules a day just for prevention, just to try to keep their immune system a little stronger because their thymus gland isn't there anymore. During the pandemic, I think almost all adults might want to consider taking 2 capsules a day. At the first sign of infection, I personally would take 4 capsules twice a day to try to boost all of these factors. Remember that these immune cells also are important in fighting cancer. So here's under the electron microscope, here's a cancer cell. And here you see these little puffballs. These are cytotoxic T cells, which when they're functioning properly, and after the age of 50, they tend not to, they bind to the cancer cell. They release certain chemicals that'll blow the cancer cell up. So within 15 minutes, if you produced a cancer cell that day and it didn't commit suicide on its own, you need these immune cells to blow the cancer cell up or destroy it in some way. But you can't just assume it's all just going to work, like they tell you in in textbooks. Without nutritional support and lifestyle support, these things start to fall away. We become more compromised. And here are macrophages. Here's what they look like. They look like little discs. Here's a macrophage finding a cancer cell, and it's going to secrete chemicals or engulf the cancer cell and then bring the spiky proteins back to the immune system and get the Cd4 cells to tell the beta lymphocytes to start making antibodies to knock those cancer cells out before they start forming a major tumor. What about melatonin? Well, melatonin is important to the immune system, and it's important as you get older, particularly because your melatonin secretion levels really decline as you get older. So of course you need melatonin to put you into a deep sleep. Melatonin protects the brain from free radical damage. Remember, the brain is using 20% of the body's oxygen at any given time. Melatonin helps to quench free radical damage. Melatonin also stimulates breast and prostate cells in a way that helps to protect them. There's evidence for that. But melatonin also supports immune system function, particularly the CD4 cell, the quarterback of the whole immune system. The T helper cells have melatonin receptors. Experimentally, we've seen that the immune cells become compromised when melatonin levels decline, and they really decline in humans. So after puberty, melatonin starts to decline precipitously. By the time you're 40 years old, the pineal gland in your brain is not making much melatonin. As you get older, it declines even further. And here's the T helper cell, the CD4 cell. Here's the immune cell. That's the quarterback of the whole immune system. It has a melatonin receptor. So as melatonin is not able to stimulate that receptor as you get older, it takes away some of the modulation so that the CD4 cells are even less intelligent now. Not only is the thymus gland gone, but melatonin stimulation is now gone. So that the T lymphocytes are now become much less able to secrete certain chemicals that tell all the other immune cells, like the natural killer cells and the neutrophils, the macrophages, the dendritic cells, the beta lymphocytes to make antibodies. None of this works properly. So melatonin really has some tremendous value. So studies here in the Journal of Biomedical Research in 2016 had a whole review article just on how melatonin helps to prevent the immune system from declining as we age by keeping the T lymphocytes functioning more normally. And so then there's a follow-up article here that's also outstanding, showing the different mechanisms through which melatonin affects macrophages and neutrophils and dendritic cells, and helps the CD4 cell mature and act more effectively, helps the natural killer cells work more effectively. It's astonishing stuff. So personally, I don't want my melatonin levels dropping that low. And there's also very good evidence to show that melatonin has important anti-cancer properties. It's published in 2015 in the International Journal of Cancer Clinical Research. Not only does it keep the immune system strong, which helps to defend against cancer, but it has some direct anti-cancer properties as well, which are worth reviewing if that's an area of interest for you. So in February, what did the National Institute of Health have to say about melatonin in COVID-19? They said, well, melatonin represents another potential antiviral agent. We've seen it work. Most notably, and I love this, melatonin, vitamin D, and zinc have attracted public attention because they were included in the treatment plan of the former president of the United States. That's Donald Trump. Love him or hate him. That's what they gave him at George Washington Hospital. Now, the thing is that not everybody who has COVID-19 who's hospitalized with it is getting this kind of a cocktail. I don't understand why they're not. But they're not. But these are nutrients that have been used, and even the National Institute of Health is saying, it actually shows some tremendous therapeutic potential. We're getting close to the end. L-Glutamine. L-Glutamine is an amino acid, which is the most prominent amino acid in the bloodstream. When you exercise, a lot of that L-Glutamine goes to the liver and gets converted into blood sugar and sent off to your muscles, so your muscles have energy to burn. But the L-Glutamine is also one of the primary fuels of many of your immune cells. So when you exercise, you're taking one of the primary fuels that your immune cells need for energy, and you're giving it to the liver to convert into glucose, and it sends it over to the muscles that are exercising. That's great for the muscles that are exercising and for your performance that day. But this decreased L-Glutamine blood level that results sort of deprives immune cells of some of the L-Glutamine that's useful for itself to help to do the things that immune cells do. So in a suboptimal state of L-Glutamine, the immune cells become less effective. And if you overtrain, of course, your cortisol levels are higher and you can't make antibodies, as I said earlier. But studies have shown that if you take people who are exercising and you give them 2 to 5 grams of L-Glutamine each day, that the incidence of upper respiratory tract infections in even highly trained athletes is significantly lower throughout the year. So these are the studies that actually have shown that glutamine supplementation is useful in people who are exercising to decrease risk of upper respiratory tract infections. And right now, that's what you want to do. You want to exercise mild to moderately, but also make sure you have enough L-Glutamine in your bloodstream. So on January 6, 2021, there's this group of medical doctors in the United States, the Frontline COVID-19 Critical Care Alliance. This was a group of doctors who actually invented the intravenous cocktail that is used to treat sepsis. So these aren't just a bunch of conspiracy guys out in right field making things up. So what they did is they said, we're going to take the protocol that we use for sepsis that's been tried and true and used consistently, at least in the United States, as a treatment to prevent death from sepsis. And we're going to modify it slightly, and we're going to give it to COVID-19 patients. And we're going to include in that cocktail not only the drugs, but also the vitamin C, which is ascorbic acid, thiamine, which is vitamin B1, and zinc, and vitamin D, and melatonin, and magnesium. And so they tested it in two hospitals in the United States, and they said, so far, this is what we've shown, that people who were hospitalized with COVID-19, we're decreasing mortality rates by a significant amount just by giving them this IV cocktail that has certain drugs and certain supplements that are combined. And then they said, there's some evidence right now that this anti-parasitic drug called ivermectin might actually be helpful in COVID-19 patients. So they recently modified their protocol using ivermectin with vitamin C and vitamin D and quercetin, we'll look at that in just a second, and zinc and melatonin preventatively, right? And adding aspirin as well to reduce inflammation and fever. So, these medical doctors who are sort of on the cutting edge of these things are using these nutrients and combining them because they have synergistic effects. When it comes to quercetin, some of you may know about quercetin. It's a flavonoid found in apples and onions, but when you take it at high levels, it has very potent antiviral effects. That's why these doctors included quercetin in their intravenous little cocktail. But when you take quercetin orally, when it gets into the bloodstream, it can quickly oxidize into a form where it's biologically inactive. But if you have it with vitamin C stabilizes the quercetin so the quercetin can have its antiviral effects. What I'm saying to you is that if you're deciding to use quercetin, I haven't used it up to this point, but you need to always take it with vitamin C. Don't take it by itself. And I would say don't take more than 1,000 milligrams of quercetin on any given day. So for every 250 milligrams of quercetin you take, I'd make sure you're getting at least 500 milligrams of vitamin C to stabilize it so it actually will have the intended effect. So let's summarize what we've said here so far. We said that practical strategies for immune support, right? Mild to moderate exercise is a great idea, but don't overtrain. By the way, if you want to track, your steps or your physical activity, we have a free app. It's the Meschino Wellness app. You can find it in the Play Store. Not only does it, you can enter your steps, but it also, if you do other types of activity, if you're biking using an elliptical machine, doing rowing, if you're doing gardening or if you're playing badminton, you can add you can add other activities. It'll convert it into step equivalents. So it'll give you the legitimate step printout for the day. So it's not just how many steps did I walk, but it's all these other activities can be added in so you get a true count of sort of your energy expenditure, which is really the only fair way to track your steps or your energy expenditure each day. Don't smoke and avoid and limit alcohol and recreational drugs that weaken the immune system, including THC and CBD. Get the sleep that you need so your T lymphocytes can come out into the bloodstream and fight the good fight. Manage your stress as best you can using mind-body techniques. Find hobbies, other distractions. Exercise is also helpful for managing stress. Keep your omega-3 supplementation down to 2,000 milligrams a day. Try not to go higher than that. In terms of supplement considerations, this is what I'm doing. I created the Adëeva all-in-one multiple vitamin and mineral. So what I used to do, of course, in the old days is I would buy like a standard multiple vitamin like Centrum, or one a day or something like that. And then I would buy extra vitamin C, and then I'd buy extra vitamin E, then I'd buy extra selenium, then I'd buy extra vitamin D, and then, and a B50 complex. So I'd be buying 6 or 7 different things just to get what you could really get all in one product. But companies don't like to put it all in one product because they lose sales of 7 different bottles. But a more cost-effective and convenient way to get these nutrients at ideal dosages, the ones that I've shown you, is the Adëeva all-in-one multi has already a built-in 1,000 milligrams of vitamin C, 400 IUs of vitamin E, the 200 micrograms of selenium that I showed you, the 15 milligrams of zinc, the 1,000 IUs of vitamin D, bioflavonoids, and everything from vitamin A all the way through zinc, including a B50 complex. So the whole formulation breaks down and looks like this. Not enough vitamin A to be toxic. That's very important that you don't start consuming high doses of vitamin A. That can be damaging. Now here's the vitamin C at 1,000, the vitamin D at 1,000. That's the maximum Health Canada will allow in a multivitamin. 400 IUs of vitamin E. Here's a B50 complex already built in there. The first 500 milligrams of calcium to help protect against bone loss, a little bit of iron, not enough to be toxic, unless you have hemochromatosis, and then you would have been told not to take any iron at all. Here's the 200 milligrams of magnesium. Here's the 15 milligrams of zinc. Here's the 200 micrograms of selenium that they're recommending in Germany and elsewhere. And everything all the way down to lutein for your eyes to help reduce risk of macular degeneration, and lycopene for the prostate gland and for the cervix of the uterus. So it's sort of an all-in-one multiple vitamin that really saves you having to go and buy 9 different things, and it's more cost effective, and the convenience of using it, I think, is better. Also, for people over the age of 50 especially, but I think during the pandemic, all adults ought to consider Immuno-Detox Prime to get the reishi mushroom extract with astragalus, milk thistle, and the indole 3-carbinol. It's something that I do. I never miss that step. The multi and that. And if I were starting to have symptoms, I would take 4 capsules twice a day. And I might even try the Adëeva Regacept capsules with the P73 wild oregano blend. For certain types of infections, it can be helpful. Is it helpful against COVID-19? I have no idea. But because it has these antimicrobial properties, it might be worth trying. Additional vitamin C, as I said, during the pandemic, I'm taking an additional 500 milligrams of vitamin C twice a day. If I were starting to have an infection of any kind, I would up that to 4,000 to 5,000 milligrams a day in divided doses of 500 milligrams. If I were going to use quercetin, I would make sure I'm combining that with vitamin C, as I told you earlier. For vitamin D, the 1,000 IUs of vitamin D in the high potency multivitamin that I showed you may not be high enough to get your blood level above 80. So I take an additional 1,000 IUs of vitamin D a day. It's very inexpensive to do that. My blood level of vitamin D is 105 nanomoles per liter. So I'm right in the range that I want to be at 2,000 IUs a day. For people who have autoimmune disease, if they're overweight, if they're type 2 diabetic, if their skin is darker, they might actually have to take more vitamin D than that to get into the ideal range. So knowing your blood vitamin D level is critically important. So this brings us back to this other point, and that is, how do I know what my blood level is of all of these things? I showed you the ideal blood level for vitamin C, for zinc, for vitamin D, for selenium even. And the thing is that these tests are not done routinely when you live in Canada. So when you have a healthcare system that's a universal healthcare system, as great as it is, and I'm glad we have it, but there's not money for everything. So if you want to know your vitamin D blood level, you have to pay for it. But I think it's worth doing that. Same with vitamin C, right? If you want to make sure you're above 50 micromoles per liter, but honestly, if you're getting 1,000 milligrams of vitamin C a day, you're in the ideal range. You're already past 50. I can guarantee it, unless you start getting sick, and then the turnover is faster. For zinc, if a person comes out of COVID-19 and they still can't taste their food, they can't smell very well, this person should go and have their blood zinc levels tested. Because to me, it looks like an obvious zinc deficiency that they probably have accumulated over many years. Has been a marginal zinc deficiency, but then during the infection, the zinc gets turned over even faster. Now the deficiency becomes more severe, and now they have long-term, long hauler type COVID-19 symptoms, probably because their zinc is low. But the idea is you go and you get it tested, you have to pay for it. It's not expensive. The other thing that I did, especially in the initial stages of the pandemic, is I ordered this product from New Mexico called the 14 mushroom blend from Mushroomharvest.com, taking 1 or 2 teaspoons a day mixed into some juice. Does it taste good? No, it tastes awful. But just choking that down gives you an incredible blend of these medicinal mushrooms, which I think can make a very big difference. So in recent weeks, I haven't been as compliant with that, but I really would intend to get back to it because I'm well over the age of 50. My thymus glands probably shrunk down. This is something that I want to carry me through into older life if I can. Immune modulation through medicinal mushrooms. That's a product that I would use in addition to Adëeva Immuno-Detox Prime. If you're over the age of 40 and you want to get some melatonin back into your system, as I do, I use Adëeva Sleepy Naturals because it not only has melatonin, but it has other synergistic nutrients that help to induce better sleep, raise serotonin levels, protect the brain against free radicals. I sort of combine things into this really clever little product I call Sleepy Naturals, and you see the dosage recommendations below. As you get older, you have to increase the dosage because your melatonin levels are dropping further. I would get a good broad spectrum probiotic and also eat fermented foods, kimchi and sauerkraut, pickled turnips, one of my more recent favorites, non-fat yogurt that's going to have, live bacterial culture, all these tempeh, miso soup, all these things are fermented foods. And then of course, L-Glutamine, I would using a powder, say 5,000 to 10,000 milligrams mixed into some juice or a shake. So the supplementation strategy is, from my standpoint, I'm using the all-in-one multiple vitamin from Adëeva with Immuno-Detox Prime, Sleepy Naturals, and then adding the extra vitamin C, a little more vitamin D, getting a probiotic, a medicinal mushroom blend, and some L-glutamine powder, just 2 teaspoons a day. So that takes me to the end. I hope that was helpful. You can reach me at adëeva.com after this if you have any questions. But right now, I'm in a position where if you've asked questions along the way, Arlene can feed them to me. I'll be happy to answer them in the time that remains.
Yes. Thank you very much, Dr. Meschino. We have a question from Lana about melatonin. She's asking, can melatonin supplementation be safe for an extended time, i.e. for years?
Well, in my view, melatonin is safe to take for years because over each, with each day that you take it, it's giving you the benefits. It's giving your brain the melatonin to help you get into a deeper level of sleep. It's acting as an antioxidant in the brain, which is important, especially as you get older, because you're losing antioxidant protection. It's stimulating breast cells and prostate cells in a way that tends to promote healthy behavior of those cells and make them less prone to cancerous changes. And it certainly modulates the immune system because your melatonin levels are not going to come back to youthful levels like, automatically. The only way to actually do it long term is to take it long term. It's like coenzyme Q10. Once you start taking coenzyme Q10, because your body doesn't make optimal amounts anymore, you're not taking it for 2 weeks. Either you're going to take it for the rest of your life or don't bother starting because your body's never going to make the CoQ10 at optimal levels that you made when you were younger. Same with melatonin.
Thank you, Dr. Meschino. All right, we have another question. This one from Joanne. Um, Joanne is asking, is it better to take vitamin D with vitamin K?
Well, there's a vitamin K called vitamin K2 that may have, like vitamin D, some anti-cancer properties. But I haven't seen enough evidence to recommend that vitamin K be added. Vitamin K makes me a bit nervous because vitamin K can increase clotting factors in the blood. And right now, during the pandemic, clots are a big issue, as you know. So because vitamin K turns on the synthesis of clotting factors, I'm not comfortable with it. Now that's vitamin K1. Vitamin K2 may not be a factor in clotting, but whether or not it's going to augment immune function and have a decreased sort of cancer effect is still yet to be determined in my view. But if you eat fermented foods, you're getting lots of K2 right there. So that's the way I get my K2.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Meschino. Before I ask you the next question or pass on the next question, we did get a great logistical question, and that is from Lana again. Can we rewatch this webinar to look into the references? And that is absolutely yes. We are going to not only send you the slides in an email or a link to the slides, but also a link to the recording of this webinar. So you'll be able to watch it and maybe involve other family members or friends to watch it with you. And therefore, you'll have everything that you need at your fingertips in terms of all the information that was presented by Dr. Meschino during the webinar. Okay, so let's go to the next question. This is from Claudia. In the case of a child of 6 years, which D and C daily requirements do they need?
So my area of weakness in nutrition is in infancy and early childhood nutrition and childhood nutrition. I'm not the expert, so I don't know the answer. But you might want to consult a dietitian who would probably be able to fill you in. I mean, when the person's body is that small and their liver and their kidneys are not fully developed, then everything has to be scaled down. And to what degree, I don't personally know.
Okay, great. Um, there is a question again from Claudia. Is it recommended to take an aspirin before the AstraZeneca vaccine for a 55-year-old?
That's a question for medical doctors to
Right.
debate. And so I don't know the answer.
Okay.
For me, if I were getting the AstraZeneca vaccine, I probably wouldn't take the aspirin. Other things make you more prone to blood clots, not having enough vitamin, as you saw in this presentation. I'm sorry I had to go so quickly. There's just so much to cover, but you'll get the slides. But not
Yeah.
having enough vitamin C increases the risk of blood not clotting properly, and not enough vitamin D in your blood increases the risk. So if your nutritional status is good, and mine is really good, then I'm not so concerned about a blood clot forming. And if you're exercising, that helps to decrease the tendency for blood clots as well. And getting some omega-3s below 2,000 milligrams a day, not eating a lot of saturated fat. That's how you decrease the stickiness of your blood in the first place.
Terrific. And I'm not sure if there are any more questions. I think that is it. If anyone does have a question, please type it into the chat box down at the bottom of your screen. If you're on a tablet, you can tap participants and then tap chat.
Yeah. Well, Arlene, I see we've gone a little bit over time.
Yes.
And if anyone has a question that comes to mind afterwards, you can always email me at drjames@adeva.com. I will get back to you, because this is an important time to make sure you're dealing with the facts. And if something is just my opinion, I'll tell you it's my opinion. But for the most part, I usually can provide the scientific references to support it. So on that note, I really want to thank all of you for attending this evening. It's been a great pleasure to have the ability to sit here and go through all this research that I've been looking at for the last little while and share with people that have an interest. So I'm very grateful. Arlene, thank you for being the moderator.
You're most welcome.
Everybody else, thank you. Stay well, stay safe, and maybe we'll see you on another webinar sometime soon. Thank you and good night.